John.
This recommendation is for the City of Waltham to proceed into schematic design to construct a new high school on a new site. This recommendation is contingent upon them, like the last project, gaining full ownership, control, and exclusive use of the site. The proposed project will serve an agreed-upon enrollment of 1,830 students in grades 9 through 12 and has an estimated construction budget of about $310 million.
I would seek a motion that the executive director be authorized to approve the City of Waltham as part of its invitation to feasibility study to proceed into schematic design for a potential project for the Waltham High School. The full vote language can be found in your book under tab 4. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Board discussion?
Oh, go
No,
right
go
ahead,
ahead.
Terry. Okay. Yeah, I just, thank you. I'm Greg Sullivan, I'm a board member. I just wanted to ask a general question about the cost per square foot for this proposed new construction for high school. And on our data, and I compliment the MSBA tremendous staff for their detail that they provide to the board, which is extremely valuable. It's listed at $560 a square foot. That's very, very high. And then, in addition to that, there's a site building takedown, including hazmat costs, of $76 million, which estimated total construction cost of $310 million and project cost of $380 million. Now that is a lot of money. I remember when the city of Newton built the high school, it got so much publicity, they called it the Taj Mahal. That was $190 million. So now we're talking about a project for $381 million. And I know that the MSBA has been working on a project looking at the contributing factors that have been leading to higher construction costs, but in Massachusetts, so under the MSBA. But I just would like to know why is this project showing up at $560 a square foot? It's so much higher than the other projects that seem to be coming across the board's table. Thanks.
This project is, it's got two major components. We're at the preferred schematic phase, so we don't have the detailed breakdown of costs, but you are correct in a breakdown between the building and the site. The building itself at $560 per square foot is on the higher end, but we do have other projects within that realm of cost. Some of the more expensive high school projects that we have. It's still early in the project. There's long construction schedule associated with this. And the other component is the site. The new site does have a lot of ledge and is a challenging site. It does provide some features, and there's also some athletic amenities that are beyond what MSBA's scope will cover. It is what it is. We're at preferred schematic, and the district now will go into the next phase to take a look at what they can as it relates to construction contingencies, construction schedule, and possibly a look at some of the scope to see where this project ends when we have a little more detail at the conclusion of schematic design. As you're aware, our grant is what our grant is based on our funding caps, and like all other projects will be applied to this project.
Any other yes, Terry?
So, yes, Mr. Sullivan, I was honing in on the same thing because it was an issue that was lengthily discussed during FAS meetings.
Oh, good.
Also, they have included a number of amenities that are ineligible for MSBA funding. And one of the things that came up with this and a couple of the projects that have come in quite high with costs that are ineligible, it brought to mind the fact that even though we're not paying for the square footage, MSBA is paying for designer services for those, so that is an issue that we're going to be taking up to see whether or not we should continue that practice, because that is very costly, especially when there's a lot of add-ons. Interestingly enough, Waltham says they can do this project without asking for an override. I think because they have a lot of corporate entities within the geography of it. But nevertheless, just because they say, you know, they don't need the override, we're still pushing hard on the cost of this particular project.
Any other comments or questions before we hear, yes,
Oh,
Sean?
Just to comment on that, it's not because they have a large amount of corporate entities, you're still capped by Prop 2.5. They have $30 million, give or take, of excess capacity, which is taxing levy capacity that they haven't tapped into. The taxpayers, no matter what the price of this, will see an impact. And if they have to tap in, you know, to that for whatever the numbers are gonna be at this magnitude, that will be a significant increase in our tax bills. Whether it's a debt exclusion or not, they still need to pay for it above and beyond their current cost structure, so.
Thank you,
We're
Sean.
concerned.
Sorry, Terry?
I just said we're concerned.
We are going to hear from the district, and I would like to recognize Representative Tom Stanley.
Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer and the board. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you do for all the communities in Massachusetts and especially Waltham. I do want to acknowledge there's two city councilors here, Diane LeBlanc and Carlos Fidel. I am also on the city council. And as I just have a couple of concerns and questions. First, let me just say that everyone is excited about getting a new facility and hopefully a new high school. My son is is a sophomore this year, so I'm still acutely aware of what hasn't changed in the building since I graduated. And as I understand the process, I would hope that Waltham would move through today's proceedings. But MSBA specifically seemed to mention cost as a concern in the letter, most recent letter to the district, as well as a discussion today, in ownership. So I just wanted a better clarification on what potentially that means. So as far as ownership, what does MSBA mean by ownership? Does that mean that there's an agreement between the Stigmatines in the city, or that all timeframes for legal proceedings have expired, or what is it exactly does it mean? And then as far as cost, Waltham was right next to Newton, and I vividly remember what happened in Newton, and I'm told that the inflation cost of that school today would be about $230 to $40 million. And I'm aware of the cost projections as of today for Waltham. And so I know that the state's contribution is capped. But does the MSBA, does it take into consideration the total cost of the project and whether the board goes through? And I know you take into consideration the ability of the community, and rightly so, to finance the project. But is there any concern with the cost? It seems like I haven't heard of another high school with a higher cost. And you're the experts. I mean, is this the most expensive one ever? You know, and, how does it relate to across the country or New England? And so I'm just trying to think of, so we, you know, moving forward, these are a couple of the things that we would like to know. because I want a new high school. And so if there are things that need to be accomplished now, I want to make sure that they're accomplished so that we don't get too far down the road and have to start all over again. So if you could just comment on what ownership means to you, and also what the cost of the project, if you have any, what your concerns are beyond what you've mentioned, and how it could or could not relate to your decision making. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Jack McCarthy to speak first.
All great questions, Representative, and things that we've been considering here. Is this the most expensive project? So far, yes. When Somerville was voted in a year ago, that was the most expensive, and then I forget who eclipsed them next year. Arlington and Lowell. So it's a trend. It's moving in a trend that we don't like, but it's hard to control it. We do have, and we're just about to sign a contract with a consultant to help us understand cost. We had an interesting lunch and learn the other day where we had a cost expert, and basically the Metro Boston area and I think it's San Francisco are probably the two highest cost construction cost places going right now, because we're in such a robust building. As you can see when you drive around, you see all of the cranes, and we just finished 2 casinos, so by the time you guys break ground, maybe it will be a little different. I don't know, but I do know that they're very conservative at this time in how they're estimating it. I know that on the site, they put in a lot of site work because they haven't done all of the borings that they want to do, so they're holding some money just in case they find worse conditions than they think. But you're right on. We are always concerned about the cost. And every time we set a new record, we're not happy about it. But and as you know, we cap our risk, and so the risk then turns to the district. And you folks have a in Waltham, if they don't have a debt exclusion override, the city council is the one that can vote to say, all right, we think this is too costly. And if you do that, I get that. But and the first question that you asked. By the time we have a project funding agreement, so that's how much longer down the road, Mary?
I believe it's in August.
Mhm.
So we won't sign a project funding agreement with you until you have control of the site. So that would mean that the eminent domain was perfected. And if you're just fighting over money with the previous owners, you still have control of that site. I understand there is some litigation. I don't know exactly where it stands, but we can't go forward with signing a project funding agreement until you have, what's the magic words, control?
Control, it's full ownership, control, and use of the site. So, and any,
I don't think
all legal issues.
Do this. I got it.
You'd have to have full ownership, control, and use of the site, and any legal actions would have to be resolved before we entered into a project funding agreement.
If you don't mind, so is there a timeline on that for MSBA? Or when's the danger of getting kicked off the top of the list and put down to the bottom?
Well, first of all, and I don't mean to correct you, but I get very sensitive to the word list, because we don't have a list. Every year we have a brand new competition, but we'll hold it. August is not the deadline. August is probably the earliest that we would sign a project funding agreement with you. We've held for, Westfield had some issues with their site, and Lowell had some issues, so we can always give an extension. I don't know that, I can't speak for the board if they have a drop dead date. We have not experienced that in the past yet. So I don't want to say it's open-ended, but Treasurer, maybe you can.
I think what I would say is that we need to see progress and work at resolving these issues. It obviously, we have a cap of what we can do, and so we want communities to work towards solving issues We do give extensions, and we've done it in the past, but it can't be completely open-ended.
Right, well, thank you.
Particularly, this project would tie up a lot of our capital.
Thank you, and just, I guess, more directly on the cost, I don't want to give the impression that I or anyone else at this stage does not want this project to go forward, but when do you, knowing how public policy works, I don't want the cost to become the discussion at the very end locally. So when is a good time to have that discussion about what the community is willing to pay?
I mean, right now, yeah, I mean,
You should, Representative, right now is when the community should be talking. As you know, the question was, is the community ready? So the community has been relayed to us that there is the capacity to, within the current tax structure of the city of Waltham, to pay for a school. And that ultimately, it's up to the community to decide, through its elected officials, which direction that they want to go to. So, for us, it's, we ask this question all the time: how many community meetings have you had? How have you discussed the price and the cost, and what does the city want? So those conversations should be, and my assumption is that they are happening all the time at your local level. And ultimately, again, it's if the community wants their elected officials to support and move forward, then you answer to your constituents. And as as mentioned, within the city of Lowell, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation about cost and about location, and it took a long time for them to sort out which direction that they want to go to. And so we listen, but we also realize that there is a time that it takes the community to come to these important decisions, and ultimately it's up to you to decide which direction.
Yes, Sean?
Can I just add one thing to that? So you as a city council are gonna have to take a vote on the tax rate when the debt service is fully, when you're gonna start paying it back in full. So just because we're talking about, you can afford it within your capacity, I mean, our website has a few calculators. You're talking, depending upon the debt service, how you structure it, another $1 to $2 on the tax rate. In the commercial side, $2 to $3, because you classify. So when you take a vote on a tax rate, and you ask your assessor, what's the impact on the average single-family tax bill, when that debt service kicks in, it's gonna be a very large increase. So even though you're not going to the voters and saying, do you wanna increase your taxes for this, you'll be taking vote on a tax rate a few years down the road now, because you'll probably short-term borrow this for a couple of years and then fully, long-term finance it. So at some point, you or whoever's on the city council will be taking a vote on a tax rate that will be a heck of a lot higher than it would otherwise be.
Right, and I understand that, and thank you very much. So again, I certainly hope that Waltham moves forward today, but you've given me some good feedback and asking for further discussion about the costs, all the costs now locally, and not waiting until Waltham is actually voting on a tax rate every November or on a loan order. So thank you very much, and I thank you for your support. And Waltham officials have worked very, very hard on this for a long time, and I'm sure that at the end of the day, we're going to have a wonderful facility with your help. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I do want to, before I take more questions, the mayor of Waltham is on the phone, Mayor Jeannette McCarthy, as is the superintendent of schools, Dr. Drew Etchelson. So, Madam Mayor, I would like to give you an opportunity to speak.
Good morning, Madam Treasurer. How are you?
How are you?
Good, thank you. And Dr. Eccleston, as you said, is with me. We've had much discussion at the school building committee level, and we did go to the city council originally with the cost that was submitted originally. However, we understand that we have a full obligation to go over both that locally as well as with your people. And I can't thank you enough over this 2.5-year delay. I want to thank you and the entire MSBA staff for everything that you've done to help us. And we will get through this process. It will be clear. The city council has gone to 35%, the exemption. So we have been indicating, that should have been done over a period of time, but it's not. And so we'll deal with that as well. And the only other thing I like to say is there are a lot of contingency in there. And at the review that I went to at the MSBA just recently, we indicated that that was based upon the contingencies, but also we're trying to utilize the site because it is so much site work to have the parking and the field on the same structure. So that's and that's kind of a new concept for the MSBA, but we're exploring that. So in the economies of scale, we're trying to reduce the cost of blasting. So I want to thank you, and Superintendent is here as well.
Just to echo the mayor's comments, I want to appreciate all the support and guidance we received from MSBA staff. As you know, they're fantastic and have really provided a lot of both technical support and just sort of advice as we're moving through the process. I think there's been broad community support for the preferred alternative that we proffer in our PSR, and we hear and appreciate the feedback on costs, and I know that the mayor will be working with the entire community to ensure that we're examining this as closely as possible as we move forward into schematic design, assuming a positive vote from the MSBA board today.
Hang on a second, Terry. I do want to acknowledge that I believe here with us today is Bill Cuniff, Lorraine Finnegan, Brian Black, who are designers and OPMs. But I do have questions from first Sheila and then Terry.
Yes, I want to take us back to the discussion about control of the property. There is that 3-year window during which the owner can file legal action demanding that the price is a different price. I don't think that you necessarily, the tradition is not that you lose the property with that filing, but you then end up just having to pay more. So when you talk about control of the land, you get the control by the purchase, but there is that window during which litigation can be filed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Terry?
So, well, especially because the superintendent is online, I want to add positive comment to this, that the educational plan that was submitted for this high school was an excellent plan, and it included preparing the faculty for a whole new way of operating a high school within the building. Having been in education for a long time, I really welcome seeing that kind of plan from the city of Waltham that had not been doing such cutting-edge stuff in the past. But I also wanted to note that the superintendent, who has been there for 4 years and who's probably seriously responsible for the change that has existed in Waltham, is going to be moving on to be part of the Principal Center, where former MSBA person, Mary Grasso O'Neill, is running the Principal Center. So I just want to be sure, having been on a school committee before, no, we cannot bind a future council or school committee to a particular budget or plan, but I just want to urge also the people who are making these decisions to ensure that the plans for professional development and the educational plan that was submitted for this building does continue beyond this particular person's superintendency, and as you move to hire a new superintendent, that philosophy and this impetus be carried forth, because it's very important that if we build a very expensive school, that it be used properly as well.
Thank you for that extremely valuable point, Terry, but I am rather certain that as long as you sit here, that the likelihood of you moving forward on this project and the likelihood of you ensuring that the proper educational plan continues will be first and foremost in your mind. And you will articulate that on a frequent basis to everyone that you come in contact with. Is that not correct?
And Matt also.
Right. Matt sometimes does it in a little bit more concise fashion. Or maybe not as much frequency. Maybe not as much frequency. But but you know what? That's because it's so important.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
So, I believe that we have gone through hearing from the district, and we have talked, I think, very thoroughly about the challenges and issues for the community. We have a motion, we have a second. So all those in favor.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry to, extend the
That's okay.
dialogue on this. I don't mean to do so. And I want to second your compliment to Board Member Terry Kwan for her vigilance on this tremendous contribution that she's made. But if I understand it correctly, we're voting to proceed with the preliminary design
Correct.
to build the new school and or to design the new school under option 5B3, which is the price I was discussing before of estimated total construction of $310 million. And total project of $381 million. But I see on the list, on the chart that the board has, that the professional staff here at the MSBA has put together for the board, very valuable again, I say, which lists that the base case, option 0, the base case is to repair and code upgrade. And that only costs $135 million. I mean, a lot of times we'll see on the projects that come through here that you say, well, might as well build a new school because to bring it up to codes and it costs practically the same thing. That's what happened in my hometown of Norwood, where we built a new high school for $76 million under the superb leadership of the town moderator who's sitting beside you. This is back in history. But there's such a big swing here between $135 million for the base case to bring it up to code. Now, I noticed that and I'll conclude with this, I noticed that under the other options, there's an expansion. So there's an expansion of about 10% of the school. Maybe they need it. In other words, it's no good to repair your school if it's undersized. You have to have another solution. But I just wanted to ask about that, because I don't know, should we be voting on the most expensive high school in history, the state, and just have them start drawing up the plans? I don't want to throw a wrench in the works, but if it costs $240 million less to just repair the existing school and bring it up to code, this project's going to use up a lot of our cap, a lot. I mean, this one project it brings up I have one final question for Jack McCarthy, if it's okay.
I was going to have Jack respond.
That is, what would be the approximate MSBA share of the funding, and once you exclude everything? I know we're not at that stage yet, Jack, but
Yeah, I don't know that we know an exact dollar amount because we can't tell from the submission now everything that's ineligible. Is that?
Correct, but
Mary?
part I think of the reason that we were so emphatic at FAS for the conversation and in our letter detailing the issues on the cost was because we understand that the lion's share of this will be with the district and not
Right.
here at the MSBA. And so, 25% potentially, John very wisely is telling me that he can't tell right now. We've heard that they're still working the budget, they're still working the contingencies. Certainly, the district is able to calculate that, and I believe as part of our conversations with them, we always, in a project like this, tell them to work with their OPM and their designer and have them calculate the square footage times 333 times our eligible cost. It's fairly simple to come up with the number. So we can approve an amount. It will be certainly nominal towards the nominal contribution towards the cost of this project at 381 if it stays at 381 when we see them in August.
Sean?
Can I just follow? So does the OPM have a number using that framework?
I'm sorry, I'd have to go and look in our documents in terms of whether or not they gave us a number or not. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, whether or not we actually got the number from them.
I don't want to confuse it with the other projects, and we're already working in April,
All
so
right.
there's a good chance I'll say something wrong, so I
So
won't
we
mind.
can take a look back through the submittal. I know we asked for it. We asked for them to break out all of the site costs. And we'll continue to push them on that regard, because what's important, as was discussed here today, and the reason we are making sure they understand what might be eligible and what might not be eligible is because the time for the community to understand what they are going into schematic design to create and what their cost is now. And so we always try to make that point here before this vote is taken so that they don't go forward schematic design and then someone is at project scope and budget is saying, I had no idea it was going to be $381 million.
Just one final
Yes.
follow-up. A board member, Sean Cronin, is constantly talking about this subject when projects come up. A lot of cities and towns, they say, what's our reimbursement rate? A certain percentage. What's the total project? And they do a simple math calculation. Sean Cronin is always talking about this. Go in with your eyes open. What is your share going to be? And I think that Mary and John are very prudent not to throw numbers around because they want to be exact. Numbers are powerful, but the amount of funding that's going to be coming from Waltham for this project is going to be very, very large. And I think that I'm kind of reluctant to vote for this, to go to design and without some assurance from the city saying, yeah, we know what it is, and we'll start designing it, we're gonna pay for it, our share. I don't know. This is a highly unusual conversation, by the way.
Greg, I think that this is I hope, and the mayor is on the phone, as is the superintendent, and we have the representative here who's a city councilor and other city councilors. This should be a very sobering conversation. I believe that point was made in the FAS, the point has been made by John and Mary. We've all made that point. Even though a debt exclusion or an override may not need to happen, this is going to absorb what is available to the city of Waltham. And that needs to be, as a former chairman of the Board of Selectmen, we have former school committee members, former deputy town administrators, former town managers. All of us here have felt that pain. And so consequently, we want to make that point very, very clear, that the city of Waltham will be absorbing a great deal of the cost, particularly when they get down to business and look at what costs will be ineligible. So the reimbursement rate is not just applied to the total cost of the project. And one of the things that Terry brought up is the question of designer reimbursement, which is something that as these projects get to be more and more expensive, our ability to be able to absorb those costs are going to become limited. So we are going to vote to have this move forward into schematic design because I believe and I am hopeful that the conversations and the work that will take place at that phase will take into consideration all the issues that we have raised today. If that doesn't happen, then I believe that there will be additional issues and challenges for the community.
Madam Treasurer, am I allowed to speak? This is Mayor McCarthy.
Oh, well, absolutely.
Okay. The only thing I would like to say is, we put forth the straight code upgrade, which was 135. But with the addition and renovation of the Waltham High School, the estimates that have come up by independent estimators were 316 at the Waltham High School at 617 Lexington Street, 366 million at Lexington Street with all programs in the adjacencies for the larger enrollment, and 381 with the one at the 554 Lexington Street. And ultimately, it comes down to me as mayor. No funding request can, as you know, being in local government, can go in without the mayor. And I am very cognizant of this. I have been very vigilant at the school building committee, but it really comes down to us proving those figures before we get to that. And then I am assured, I will take everything that was said here today to heart, and that includes the fact that the educational program has more career and vocational technical programs that have greater regulations. But I'm fully aware of that, because it all comes down on me, because the council doesn't get the figure until I and the school building committee and school committee have done it. So I hear you, I appreciate you, and I look forward. The 2.5-year delay didn't help the cost either, but I am where I am right now, and I respectfully hear you.
I appreciate that, Madam Mayor. As you can hear from the conversation, we're trying to just have a completely open and transparent process, and hear from all of us on the board and also from the city of Waltham what the challenges are moving forward. Greg, have we addressed your concerns?
Yes, thank you, and I was very reassured to hear the mayor make the statement that she did. And based upon that, I'm going to vote yes, but I want to put a big caveat on that vote, that I think that the city, that before money is spent to start the design, the city's got to really look at what it's going to cost, and the board's going to look at how much of the total state funding will be going for this one school. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to go on at length about this. I appreciate it very much.
Well, absolutely, and that's our job. So we do have a motion, we have a second, we've had a very robust conversation. And so all those in favor of Waltham moving on to the schematic design, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed at this time? Hearing none, the motion carries. Good luck on your work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.